enthusiasts, and we're really glad to do this. So about a decade ago, a bunch of people in my lab felt that the time was right to try to develop a tree of life for turtles. And we've been working on that project, sort of beavering away at it for a number of years. And I wanted to give you an update as we're sort of nearing completion. We have completed the data collection phase of it, just to let you know where we're at, a couple of things that we found in this project. But to motivate that a little bit, I thought I'd tell you 3 interesting things about turtles that you may or may not be aware of. The first is that turtles are old. Now everybody kind of knows that. Everyone says, oh yeah, turtles, they're really ancient, whatever that means. What I mean by that is that the crowned turtles, that is the most recent common ancestor of the living turtles, is in fact very old. Now how old is up to some debate, and I'll touch on this later on in the talk, but something on the order of 220 plus or minus million years amongst the living turtles. To put that into perspective, living birds are about 100 million years. So it's really old. The second is that turtles are species poor. Okay? If you take all of the living turtles and tortoises, including marine turtles in the world, there are a grand total of 331 species. And for a group that's this well known, this heavily exploited, that's kind of an amazingly low level of variation. There's species diversification. I think there were that many seaweeds in your group. It's a very, very species poor number, and that itself is interesting. And the third is that turtles are in trouble. And from that, I mean from a conservation perspective. If you use the IUCN listing criteria for major groups of organisms, at least vertebrates, what you find is that pushing 60% of turtles fall into the categories of endangerment that the IUCN worries most about. And that compares with sort of roughly 1/3 of amphibians, something like 20% of mammals. So many people feel that turtles, in terms of the major clade of vertebrates, are the most endangered clade on Earth. And sort of tragically, the reason for this is very, very well known. It's because people hunt turtles, people eat turtles, and people exploit turtles. It's not habitat loss, it's exploitation. So what we decided we wanted to do is to build a turtle tree of life, which we've dubbed in the lab TOTW, Turtles of the World. And the goal was modest in some ways, ambitious in others. It was to try to pull together 2 samples, so at least we had some replication for every species of turtle and tortoise on the planet, develop a universal set of nuclear markers that we could use so we could have a nice square matrix to develop a tree that didn't have a lot of missing data. Assemble best fossils for dating. Turtles have a fabulous fossil record. They're basically just a big cinder block that fossilizes extremely well, so there's a wonderful record for them. Assemble a bunch of fossils, produce a time-calibrated species tree, and then use that to learn about systematics, the temporal and mode of speciation and diversification of turtles, as well as conservation. So let me tell you a little bit about where we're at on this. So we managed, it turned out, perhaps not surprisingly, the hardest part of this project was getting the tissues. We ended up, right now, we're at 283 in-group taxa, so it's about 86% complete. Probably half of the remaining ones, it's not clear they're even real species, and probably half of them are just genuine species that we haven't been able to get. We put together what now seems like a sort of charmingly quaint set of 15 genes, about 13.5 kilobases of aligned sequence data. The good news is that works across all turtles, so we can get it basically for every specimen in our alignment. And we took that and built a tree. There's a tree. And there's a lot of very interesting things we can extract from that tree. I'll tell you a couple of things about it. And we're really just starting to explore some of the comparative biology that we can use, or that we can derive from that tree. So let me tell you about a few things. Oh, I'm sorry, right. And then, in addition, while this was all going on, of course, we all got very genomic-y, and so back in 2013, we developed and published with a large team of people the first turtle genome. It was literally this turtle. She was swimming around in my lab for years, and we kept bleeding her and bleeding her and bleeding her to get her genome. There she is. And she was the first genome turtle. It's a painted turtle. Within a few months of that, some colleagues from Japan and China published genomes on 2 other species of turtles, a Chinese softshell and a green sea turtle. And so we used that to develop a pipeline where we could take those 3 species. They don't span the root node of turtles, but they span the next node out, so they give a pretty good diversification of turtles. We used that to develop a pipeline to develop a large set of markers that we could use for some of this work. And what we ended up with on that is a set of about 800 markers, about a megabase of data that if you have the money and the time and the tissues, you can apply to sort of more or less any species of turtle. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. So the first thing I thought I'd share with you is just one aspect of that phylogeny. And that's what we can call backbone phylogeny of turtles. And we approach that in 2 different ways. I'm calling it a large tree and a deep tree. So the large tree has those 591 terminals, that's almost 300 species, and it's using our 15-gene data set to look at the full phylogeny of turtles, and then from that prune it down to a backbone tree of the major clades of turtles. I should have said there are 14 families of turtles, a bunch of different subfamilies. Most people agree there's about 23 major lineages of turtles. And so we can use this tree to sort of print it down and ask, what do we learn about the relationships among those major clades of turtles? And in our deep tree, we used 539 of those genes, about 3/4 of the megabase of aligned data, on that same set of terminals to look at what we learned from a much shallower tree in terms of species sampling, but a much deeper tree in terms of the amount of data, and ask how concordant are they, and where are we at least understanding the backbone for turtles. You gotta know the names, care about this, but the bottom line is that over here is fewer genes, more turtles. Over here is fewer turtles and more genes, so those 2 different data sets, and they're spot on identical. Node for node, all 24 of those nodes, or all 23 of those nodes are spot on, and the branch lengths are virtually identical as well. And so what we feel like from this is that we really have, for all turtles on the planet, a very, very strong phylogeny, at least at the backbone level. There's a lot of sort of details within here, especially at the shallower ends, where we still need additional resolution, and I think we're going to have to bring in that larger data set of genes to work it out. But at least at this sort of fundamental level, we feel like we're in very good shape. And that's allowed us to sort of resolve some really interesting questions that people have always had about turtles. Here's one I'll give you, just if you have a turtle nut and you like these things. This is a snapping turtle, an enormous turtle. They historically got up to 50 kilograms or larger, widely distributed across most of North America. Never been clear who snapping turtles are related to. They're big, they're bad, they're totally kick-ass turtles, but they're also just full of weird features, and nobody knows where they go. Well, it turns out from this analysis, what we can say, and we've been zeroing in on this previously, is that snapping turtles are the sister group to mud and musk turtles and their relatives. And what's interesting about that is that mud and musk turtles are these little diminutive turtles that are, again, widespread all through the New World, North Central and South America. And so what a snapping turtle is phylogenetically is it's just a mud turtle on steroids. It's just an enormously big mud turtle. And that's kind of an interesting result. The other is, for those of you who are fans of these kinds of things, Ernest Williams, who did his PhD work on the neck vertebrae of turtles back in 1950, he got this and every other interesting issue that we've worked out in the major clades of turtles right, based on the cervical neck vertebrae. So Ernest was a very clever Okay, another thing we can pull out from this, just to give you sort of a teaser, how old are crowned turtles? Again, everybody agrees turtles are old, and everybody agrees that there are sort of two major clades of turtles. So there's these guys. This is a side-neck turtle, a pleurodire. This happens to be a mata-mata turtle that we caught last year up in the Rio Negro. They pull their necks into the side when they're scared. This is a hidden neck turtle, or a cryptodire. This happens to be a very pretty little nap turtle from the Apalachicola River in Florida. They pull their heads in straight when they get scared. That major split clearly defines the MRCA of living turtles, and the question is, how old is that? And the debate sort of really boils down to whether a series of fossils, things like Protocercis and Cancales, which are 200 plus or minus million-year-old fossils, whether they fall within crowned turtles or on the stem leading up to crowned turtles. The traditional view by Gene Gaffney and colleagues has always been that those turtles fall within crowned turtles, either on the pleurodire or the cryptodire side. The more kind of a more recent view, sort of championed by Walter Joyce to a certain extent, is that those are in fact stem turtles. They have nothing to do with the crown age of living turtles, and therefore the living turtles may be substantially younger in age. So what did we do? Well, what we did is we took our backbone tree of turtles, we dated that tree. What we did is we excluded all turtle fossils that were older than 100 million years old. So we sort of let this age of the root node of living turtles float, and using molecular clock estimates, estimated what that age may be. And when we did that on this tree, what we found is that our estimate of the crown age of turtles was 234 million years, just right on with pretty much with what Gene Gaffney and that sort of traditional view said. And so then once again confirming that the living turtles, they may not be very species rich, but they sure as hell are old, and that there's some very, very ancient, interesting evolutionary history of turtles. As well as, of course, getting age estimates for all the other nodes within that tree. The third and last thing I want to talk to you about is conservation. And there's no better way to bring this up than to relate to you something that happened last week. Okay, so this is a illegal consignment. It's an illegal shipment of turtles that was trying to be shipped out of the Philippines from the island of Palawan. This is a species of turtle called Palawan forest tortoise, even Rachielum The species was thought to be extinct for 80 years. It was rediscovered about a dozen years ago on the island of Palawan. The community, the turtle community, felt that there were probably about 500 of these turtles left in the world. And last Thursday, the Philippine government confiscated a shipment of 3,800 of these turtles. Okay, so this is 6 times what people thought was the global population of animals. Okay, and they're all sitting here in this dumpster, getting ready to be shipped out for the pet trade, for the food trade, and for the medicinal trade. About 2,000 of these animals have now been put back into the wild. About 1,000 died, and about 1,000 are still being cared for. So, and this is something that happens all the time in turtles. This is why turtles are in so much trouble. And one of the reasons that we really got into phylogenetics of turtles, and one of the things I care most about with this, is using that information to try to at least prioritize turtle conservation efforts. There's a very big international sort of grassroots conservation movement focused on this and many other species, and here's at least one way that you can do this. So if you use sort of traditional IUCN listing criteria, there are 46 species of turtles, about 15% of the global population, that have the highest level of endangerment under the IUCN. Okay, that's this global endangerment score of 4. And the trouble is that you can't rank those. There's just, there's 46 of them that are all in very, very, very deep trouble, but it's hard to say within that who's in the most trouble. One way that you can approach that is you can say, well, how much sort of phylogenetic diversity do those turtles take up in the total tree of life? And we can do this very effectively now because we have a tree that covers everybody and has branch lengths for everybody. And that's what this ED score, evolutionary distinctiveness score, is. And it allows you to sort of rank turtles basically by the branch length, subtending those turtles, and ask at least to say, well, one criterion for prioritization we can use is to say how much of the turtle tree does a lineage sort of encompass. You know, you put together the ED score and the GE score, and you get EDGE score, and it's pretty hip. And what that allows you to do is to rank turtles based on the combination of their ICN endangerment listing and their phylogenetic prioritization into a single thing. I just pulled out here the numbers 1 through 9 of that listing, just to sort of show you how that works. And here's our Palawan forest tortoise, Racula latensis, number 8 in the globe. Okay, and that picture you saw possibly is all of them, or most of them at least, sitting in that dumpster. It's a pretty amazing and sort of shocking thing, and I think hopefully can give us a little bit of ability to sort of, you know, work harder on preserving those animals. One other example, and then I'll shut up here, Podocamus expansa, the Amazon giant river turtle species that's very widespread in Brazil, comes up with an EDGE score of 3. It's the number 3 priority species in the globe for turtles. There's a picture of it. It's one of the largest freshwater turtles on the planet, very heavily exploited across the Amazon and Orinoco basins. So lots of neat stuff we can do with this data, lots of fun comparative work that we'll be doing on the evolution of shell shape, and lots of important phylogenetic prioritization. And looking forward to working on that in the future in the next year or so as we release these data. So thanks to the folks who helped with the genomics, and really thanks a lot to those private amateurs who have donated so many of their animals and zoos to this project to help make it work, and really appreciate that a lot. Thanks for your attention.